Chapter 2. Adjusting Custom Brushes. You can adjust the properties of the default brushes in Procreate. Tap on a brush you want to use. Tap on it again to change the properties. A new window opens that's divided into sections. On top you see the preview screen called the Precision slider. Here you can test out the adjustments of your brush. Then you have all the settings you can change. On the bottom of the screen are 7 buttons: Stroke, Shape, Grain, Dynamics, Pencil, General, and Source. Stroke settings. Tap on the button Stroke. Stroke properties. Spacing. Here you can adjust the amount of space between each plot point. If you increase the space, will create gaps in your brush. Streamline. With Streamline you can adjust the stabilization your stroke in real time. If you want smooth curves, increase the streamline of your brush. This is great for inking or doing calligraphy. Jitter. With Jitter you can adjust the density of your brush stroke. When set to none, your brush is very dense. When set to 100%, the density of your brush will spread out. Fall off. Fall off controls the overall length of the stroke. When set to 100%, you will have a very short stroke. Stroke taper. Start stroke taper. This will apply the taper of the beginning of your stroke. When set to 100%, your taper will be smallest. End stroke taper. This will apply the taper of the end of your stroke. When set to 100%, your taper will be smallest. Opacity stroke taper. With this slider you can adjust the opacity amount of your taper. Size. With size you can adjust the size of the taper on both ends. Shape settings. A shape is like a stamp. The brushes in Procreate are built up from 2 parts, the shape and the grain. The shape contains the grain. Scatter. When changing scatter, the brush will change the orientation of your brush. Higher values will give a rough feeling, while lower values will give a more streaky brush. Scatter is not affected by the brush direction. Rotation. Rotation affects the direction of the brush. You can make a flat calligraphy brush to a ribbon effect with rotation. The rotation slider has 3 main settings. -100% makes the shape rotate into the other direction of the stroke direction. 0% locks the shape direction to remain static. Follow stroke will let the shape follow the direction you are painting. Randomized. When turned off, the shape direction is based on the stroke's beginning. When turned on, the beginning of each stroke will be different. This will give each stroke a more organic feel. Azimuth. Azimuth will affect the tilt function of your Apple Pencil. When you tilt your Apple Pencil, you will get a thicker line. This is great if you're using the calligraphy brushes in Procreate. Grain settings. The brushes in Procreate are built up in 2 parts, the shape and the grain. The grain rolls like a stamp inside the shape of the brush. In this section you can alter the behavior of your grain. Movement. When set to stamp, the brush will not roll, but just stamp the grain each time you paint. When set to rolling, the grain will roll out the texture like you would paint with a paint roller. Scale. Grain scale adjusts the texture size inside the shape of the brush. Zoom. When set to follow size, the grain will scale with your brush size. When you set it to cropped, the grain texture is locked into place, and the brush shape will scale independently from the grain. Rotation. With rotation, you can adjust the rotation of the grain based on the direction you are painting. There are 3 main points along the slider. Minus 100% makes the grain rotate opposite to the direction you are painting. 0% locks the grain direction in place. Follow stroke will let the grain follow the direction you are painting. Filtered. When you toggle filtered on, it will apply anti-aliasing to the grain texture. Off can cause the grain to become jagged or coarse, depending on what kind of texture you have in your grain source. Dynamic settings. Dynamics is set up in 3 categories: normal, glaze, and wet mix. Normal. Opacity dynamics. Speed. You can adjust the speed of the opacity dynamics of your brush depending on how fast you paint. Jitter. You can vary the amount of opacity of your brush as it is stamped across the canvas. Size dynamics. Speed. You can adjust the speed of the size dynamics of your brush depending on how fast you paint. Jitter. You can vary the size of your stroke as it is stamped across the canvas. Glazed. Accumulative. When you turn accumulative on, the shape will build up as the stroke is made. Flow. This will only work if accumulative is turned on. Flow will regulate the amount of paint applied to an area every time the brush moves. Opacity dynamics. You can adjust the speed of the opacity dynamics of your brush depending on how fast you paint. Jitter. You can vary the amount of the opacity of your brush as it is stamped across the canvas. Size dynamics. Speed. You can adjust the speed of the size dynamics of your brush depending on how fast you paint. Jitter. You can vary the size of your stroke as it is stamped across the canvas. Wet mix. Dilution. Dilution is the amount of water you add to your brush. When set to 100%, you will add the full amount of water or solvent to your brush. The brush will mix and pool more paint as you drag it around. When you're painting on another layer, it will also pool and mix the colors on the other layers that are below the layer you're painting on. When you use this setting with the smudge and erase tool, it will only affect the layer you're painting on. Charge. Charge is the amount of paint that's on your brush. When set to 0%, your paint will run out immediately. When set to 100%, the brush will not run out of paint. This is a great setting for traditional artists that are used on painting on canvas. Attack. Attack is similar to charge. The main difference is that attack is affected how hard you press the brush on the canvas. Adjust these settings to how light or strong you want to paint. Pool. Pool adjusts the amount of paint you will pool from the paint that's already on your canvas. At 0%, you will not pool any paint. At 100%, you will pool away a lot of paint. It is similar to pulling away paint with a dry brush when you're doing watercolors on paper. Opacity dynamics. Speed. You can adjust the speed of the opacity dynamics of your brush depending on how fast you paint. Jitter. You can vary the amount of opacity of your brush as it is stamped across the canvas. Size dynamics. Speed. You can adjust the speed of the size dynamics of your brush depending on how fast you're painting. Jitter. You can vary the size of your stroke as it is stamped across the canvas. Pencil. Here you can adjust the settings of your Apple Pencil. When you use a supported third-party stylus, you can only adjust the pressure and size. Tilt is only available on the Apple Pencil. Pressure. Pressure opacity. When set to 0%, the brush will not react to pressure changes. When set to 100%, more pressure will decrease the stroke opacity. When set to -100%, more pressure will increase the opacity of your brush. Pressure bleed. Bleed will affect the amount of paint that will bleed into other colors that are on your canvas. When set to none, the bleed will not take place. When set to max, the brush will bleed into other colors the most. This is great for doing highlights or if you want to paint with the texture of your brush. Pressure size. When set to 0%, the brush will not react to pressure changes. When set to max, the size of your brush will be small when you press softly and becomes bigger as you press harder. When set to -100%, your brush size will decrease and taper down when you press harder. Pressure softness. With this setting you can change the level of pressure of your Apple Pencil. When set to none, you will get an immediate response to the pressure. When set to max, you have to press harder to get a gradient. This setting is great if you want to make more gradual changes in your brush. Apple Pencil tilt. Angle. This will change the tilt angle of your Apple Pencil. When set to 90 degrees, your Apple Pencil is held 90 degrees perpendicular to your screen. At 0%, your Apple Pencil is flat on your screen. Some brushes have different settings when you tilt your Apple Pencil. Play around with these settings to get the perfect transition. Opacity. When the opacity is set to none, the brush will not react to the tilt function of the Apple Pencil. When set to max, tilting the Apple Pencil will immediately make the brush fade vertically. Gradations. With gradation you control the gradation of the brush when your Apple Pencil is tilted. When set to none, you will get an immediate response to the pressure. When set to none, you have to press harder to get a gradient. This setting is great if you want more gradual changes in your brush. Bleed. Bleed will affect the amount of paint that will bleed into other colors on your canvas. When set to none, the bleed will not take place. When set to max, the brush will bleed into other colors the most. Size. When set to none, the brush size will be smallest when you tilt your Apple Pencil. When set to max, your brush will be biggest. Size compression. This allows you to toggle on and off the new tilt size behavior in Procreate 4, which compresses the size of a tilted brush depending on the position of your Apple Pencil. Stayf tip. This is a great setting for inking your images with thick and thin lines. General. Use Stamp Preview. When you toggle on Use Stamp Preview, you will only see the stamp of your brush in the preview display on top. In this way you can see the overall shape of the brush, but only if the grain of the brush isn't a great part of your brush. Preview. With the preview sliders you can adjust the size of your brush in the preview screen on top. When set to none, the preview of the brush is the smallest. When set to max, the preview of the brush is the biggest. Brush behavior. Orient to screen. On default, Orient to screen is toggled on. When toggled on, the brush will orientate itself to the orientation of your screen. When toggled off, the brush will orientate itself independently to the orientation of your screen. Blend mode. You can now choose the blend mode you want to paint with. Tap on Blend mode and choose the blend mode you want to paint with. You can choose from all the blend modes you can also use on your layers. Darken, lighten, contrast, difference, and color. In difference, there's a cool new blend mode, behind. When you select it, you can paint behind the image on your layer. This is great if you want to paint a background behind an object. Stayf tip. When using the blend mode behind, you need to paint it in one stroke without leaving your screen. Otherwise, you will paint behind the section you have just painted. Smudge. You can adjust how much your brush will smudge with colors that are already on your canvas. When set to none, the brush won't smudge. When set to max, the brush will smudge the most. Size limits. Max and min. Adjust the maximum radius of your brush. When you set the max and min size to none, your brush will be smallest. When you both set the max and min size to max, your brush will be the biggest. When a brush has a high enough stroke spacing, you can increase the brush size to a 1600% radius. Max and min size work in unison. The min size can never exceed the max size. The max size can never be smaller than the min size. Opacity limits. With maximum opacity, you can control the maximum amount of opacity the brush can reach. With minimum opacity, you can control the minimum amount of opacity the brush can be lowered to. Source. All the brushes in Procreate 4 are built up in two parts, shape and grain. In this section, you can change the shape source and shape grain of the brush. You can adjust a default brush in Procreate or make your own from scratch. Shape source. When you tap on the shape source image, it will take you to the browser on your iPad. There you can choose an image you want to use as the shape source. You can choose the image from iCloud Drive or any other cloud service you have installed on your iPad. When you tap on My iPad, you can choose the image from the folders on your iPad. Invert shape. When you tap with two fingers on the image, you can invert the shape. You can also do this by tapping on the button Invert Shape. You can also rotate the image by twisting the image with two fingers in a circular motion. It will rotate the image in increments of 90 degrees. Swap from Pro Library. Tap on Swap from Pro Library to access all of the shapes and grains of Procreate. A new window opens. You can scroll down to see all the shapes and grains. All of the default brushes in Procreate 4 are built from this Pro library. Choose a shape by tapping on it. You will return to the Edit screen. Grain source. The grain source is the grain that's inside your shape source. You can pick your image the same way you can pick your shape source and adjust it in the same way. Stayf tip. You can also make images at 2048 pixels by 2048 pixels in Procreate and save it to your Photos library, to the cloud or into the Procreate browser folder. Black areas will be transparent and white areas will be opaque. The white areas make the shape or grain of the image. Procreate accepts almost all images, including JPEG, PNG, TIFF, and GIF. Create new brush set. When you are in the Paint menu, swipe the brush set down. Then the button New Set will show up. Tap on it to create a new brush set. Name your brush set by typing in the name on your keyboard. Then tap on Return to save your custom brush set. The brush set is empty. With the plus sign in the upper right corner, you can create your own brush. But you can also drag the default brushes in Procreate into the new brush set. Making custom brushes. You can also make your own custom brushes in Procreate. When you open the Brushes panel, there is a plus icon in the upper right corner. Tap on it to make a new brush. A new window opens. Now you can create your custom brush from scratch by using the images from the Pro library or using your custom-made images. There are a lot of properties you can adjust to make your own unique brushes that suit your style of drawing and painting. Stayf tip. You can also drag multiple brushes into a new brush set. Select one brush and then swipe from left to right on the other brushes you want to select. They will turn blue. Then drag them into the new brush set. Want to learn everything about Procreate 4.3? Then get the Procreate 4 video manual on Apple Books or Vimeo On Demand for only $4.99. Learn all the features in Procreate 4.3 with over 2 hours of video tutorials. The links are in the description below this video.